And good morning, everyone. And today is the 5th day of the month of Elul. It is the 31st day of the month of August. August has 31 days, believe it or not. And we are currently in the midst of learning the book, The Four Worlds, and we are towards the bottom third of the page where it says Asiya. And we are attempting to cover the four worlds, and he explained that the highest world, the top world, is the world of Atzilus, the world of emanation, the world that's so close to God that it's basically a world of God. And then the next world following that is the world of creation, the world of Beriah. Beriah means something created from nothing. So at this stage you can already feel that there's an entity here, there's a Metzias here, which means that the godliness is not as apparent as it would have been in the higher world, the highest world of Atzilus. And then the next world after that is the world of Yetzirah, the world of formation, where there's even more form, there's even more matter that's obvious that is distant from God. And then finally you get to the fourth world, it's the world of Asiya. And that's where we're holding now, the world of Asiya. The world of Asiya is the fourth of the four worlds. And although this world too contains all the elements that are contained in Yetzirah, and it is going up, Yetzirah, Beriah, and Atzilut, that would be worlds 3, 2, and 1, nevertheless, it is the lowest of all worlds. It is therefore called Asiya, which connotes the lowest capacity, deed, or actuality. We actually did this last week. Just to review that, and one of the things that I said last week was that action, touching, feeling, doing is inherently outside of us. Even if we touch ourselves, we're touching the outside of us. We're not touching our heart, we're not touching our brain. When you see something as intangible as that is, that's going through your brain and as a result of your brain. And if the brain functional seeing didn't work, your eyes wouldn't help. There has to be a power to see inside. So it's an inside concept. The heart to feel something, the emotions inside of us. Even to speak is from the inside to the outside. But touch, action, is completely outside. It's the lowest form, which is why the lowest world is called the world of action. In other words, there is no action up there in the heavenly spheres, because there is no physical world. It is a spiritual world, and what they do is intellect rather than action. It's an intellectual exercise of understanding God. The pleasure and the reward that the soul's experience in the other world are all because of comprehension. There is no greater pleasure in the other world than the comprehension of the depths of godliness as deep as a person can, as a soul can go, or as an angel can go. Which is why, as we discussed last week, in the book of Ezekiel, book of Yechezkel, some of the angels, and this is in the daily prayers, some of the angels are described as wheels. Some of the angels of the sky are described as burning up. As other angels of the sky are described as fire and whatever. This is all different levels of comprehension of God. And based on what we do in this world, as far as comprehension of Torah, that's where we can comprehend the deeper, the inner parts of what's being delivered in the upper world. So the enjoyment, the reward in the other world is the reward of the Torah and the comprehension of godliness that is inherent in the other worlds.
So this one's supposed to be together?
I don't know.
Oh, that's together.
Next time I say,
It's kind of thick. I don't know if the staple will work.
I was putting it
So touching, feeling something is not an exercise that is of the other world. So there was no lighting the Shabbos candles, and there's no keeping kosher, and there was no putting on tefillin, and there is no mezuzah, There's no tzitzis, there's no cheating and lying, all that stuff is not, it's just not up there. So there is no opportunity to do any kind of commandment, any mitzvah does not present itself in the other world. It's all spiritual. So what are they doing all the time? They are comprehending God through the Torah. So the Torah study, that a soul of a Jew, that's why there's a difference between a Jew and a Gentile, a non-Jew. Soul of a Jew will be studying the entire Torah on the other world, but in a whole different dimension, in a whole different reality.
In the other world or out the other
No, when a person departs, when a person passes away, the soul goes up to whatever you call it, heaven or whatever, it goes back to where it came from. So some souls come from the world of Asiya, some come from the world of Yetzirah, some come from the world of Bria, some come from the world of Atzilus. When they go back up there, the veneer of the physical, of the external, is gone. And so all that's left is the spiritual. And then the spiritual Torah is different than this Torah. It's the same words. It's the same exact word, precise. But the whole understanding of it comes completely differently. Because now it's a spiritual understanding. So, and it's endless because it comes from the endless God. I didn't put any milk out there. Is everything okay?
Does anyone need
Does
milk?
anyone want
I'll
to?
go get it if someone does. What, he uses milk?
There should be milk in the fridge.
You did pretty good.
Please remember, only that counter is dairy.
Yeah.
That's the only counter that's dairy.
So you can't bring milk over here.
Well, the cups, yeah, here is fine. The
Oh, you can.
the counters, I'm talking about the rest of
Yeah.
the counters are all meat.
This is the meat kitchen here.
Everything is meat here, right?
Downstairs.
Except for that counter space, yeah, which we use as, the downstairs Passover. Dairy
There?
sink,
Oh.
the sink for dairy is in the washing machine.
Oh, okay.
The washing machine, until we,
So you have 3 kitchens.
well, eventually we will do something here and put hopefully one of those days. All right, in the meantime, it works out like that. Our big events are usually meat related. All right, so in the other world, there is no touching. That's the most external thing there is. That doesn't exist in the other world because there's no physical in the other world, and therefore there is no touching. It's all spirit, whatever that means. Just in trying to imagine a fire, but the fire doesn't have anything tangible. That flame is just some gases that are making a noise, but there's nothing there. It's just hot. It's just heat. Or it's even higher than a cloud, which is a vapor. It contains water in it. And the fire is just heat. That's the most spiritual thing that there can be. That's why the Torah, when it wants to tell us about God, it says that God is a burning fire, consuming fire. It uses that parable so to give us an example, some kind of an understanding that this is not a tangible thing. That's what the soul is, a piece of God, and it's in the other world, and therefore there is no physical commandment. Anything we do in this world goes into the bank for the upstairs world and for the future. But there is no physical, there's no reward-based existence in the other world. There is where we reap the reward, and the reward of studying. So that's the world of action. So now we've covered all 4 worlds. All right? Now, at the bottom of the page 30, where it says differences. The point of all that we have said and explained regarding the nature of the 4 worlds, Atzilus, Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya, regarding the nature of these 4 worlds, is that the structure of all that exists within the world, and I will go over them again in a minute. Chambers, 10 Sephirot, the chariot, time and space, is identical from one world to the next. The difference is in the essence of their nature. So let's just go through this again. And we've discussed this previously at great length, but it's always good to go back on these ideas and these issues. The way to look at worlds, the way to look at the structure of the world is to look at the structure of a person, of a human being. Every human being comes with a basic set of 10 levels. 3 intellectual ones and 7 emotional, characteristic ones. The intellectual ones are wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. That comprises our intellect. Wisdom is the flash. When a person is trying to solve a problem, they think, got it, it's like a flash of light. But then you have to go and break it down. Wait a minute, okay, so if John went here and Paul went there, and okay, got it. Now I can explain it. That level is already understanding. Wisdom is based on your stored and knowledge and your capabilities in your head, the capabilities of your brain. And that once that flash is there, then you have to expand it. You have to understand it. You have to know its depth and its width and its breadth. That's how these things work. So the understanding of it is the second level of intellectual capability. But the wisdom is your core, is your essence, and then it's the expansion. It's the difference between males and females. The male contribution to the next generation is a flash. The female has to sit for 9 months and expand it, understanding in depth and breadth and length and so on. So that's the wisdom, and on the end, then the understanding. Knowledge, according to the Hasidic Kabbalah mystical way of understanding, is the application, the connection. So it's good that you understand something, but now one needs to take the understanding of something and say, okay, now that I understand it, what am I going to do about it? That's knowledge. And in the Bible, knowledge, God, man, Adam knew, Eve knew, is a connection. Knowledge, knowing is knowing someone so well that you now are completely united. So now that you know something so well, you are applying it. You're understanding it. Okay, good. Now it's in my head. Now I've got to go to the next level to apply application. So those are the 3 levels of intellect. Then there are, once you apply it, what are you applying it to? So there are 7 levels within the person to make up the 10. And there are 7 characteristics. There are 7 good, and reflective of that are 7 negative. So the good ones are loving kindness. When you love someone, your heart, but if it's an emotion, just a pure emotion, then the emotions come and then the emotions go. So if I love to eat tomatoes. If you eat tomatoes too much, you're soon not going. I'm not in the mood today. So what do you mean? That's the same thing with I love to read Moby Dick. I've read it 20 times. Well, why aren't you reading it now? Oh, I'm just not in the mood. It's an emotion. It comes and it goes. I love this person. Why are you displaying no love? Oh, because I'm emotionally in a different place right now. So these come and they go. It's fleeting. But when emotions are based on the intellect, then there is never a downtime, because you always comprehend, understand, and know that this is where you're going to be. So even if you're not in a good mood, you will still continue to show that emotion of love and kindness. So if you understand that you have to give charity to the poor person who's knocking on your door, you get it, you're moved by it as well, and now you're going to actually give it. Well, the first thing is you have to be moved with your love and kindness. The second one is discipline. Too much love is no good, because then the kid will eat too much ice cream, and then that will be no good for the kid. So discipline is, and that's how discipline is a very important emotion. The next one is compassion. Compassion is really it's a mixture between love and discipline. When you have compassion on someone, it means that you have now comprehended that that person is in that situation, and what can you do about it? The fact that you are willing to do something is kindness, love. The fact is, what can you do? How far can you go? Not go. That's already a mixture of both of them. That's compassion. And then the next 4 are more connected to the action of doing something. One of them is called endurance, that you have to stop, to continue. And the other one is humility, while it's being done. And the other one is implementation, to actually physically do it. And then the 7th one is more like a self-reflection idea of where have I gone, what have I done. It's the completion of everything, so you have to take account of what has happened there. So there's intellect, then there's the emotions, and then sort of the application part of the emotions to actually do it. And those are the 7 levels. We don't have any other good. Those are the 7 categories of the 7 positive characteristics, emotions, or so within a person. Then there's the other side. There's the jealousy, and that there's the anger, which is the negative side of discipline. It's like a fire. And there is haughtiness, ego, and so on. These are other things that a person, that we all know, that we need to work on, especially in this month, the month before the high holidays. These are emotions that are they're negative, that need to be channeled into positive. So if a person has an ego, one has to be very proud of their parents, of their children, of their Judaism, of their or whatever. That's my ego talking now. So, so those are the 7 levels within us, and there's a lot to talk about here, obviously, but you know, that's the general idea. There's the 10 levels within the person, and that's within the world as well. 10 levels within the worlds. Each world contains that, as the energy of God is projected through the worlds. It goes through the worlds, and it goes through each one of them, acts like a filtration system. But there's things that are higher than that within the person that's deeper than this. For example, will. I will to do something. Will doesn't have a place. Will is everywhere. In other words, if I want to be kind, I need to use my heart to be kind. But if I want to walk, it's not that my legs are walking. And my fingers saying, hey, wait a minute, you can't walk. You see, there can be a friction between your mind and your heart. Your heart can say, I want this, and your head can say, it's not good for you, whatever. But when you want something, the will is everywhere. It's all encompassing. So when I wanted to move this finger, every part of me, within a split second, came to the same conclusion. Move your finger. And it's not, my toe didn't say, hey, you can't move your finger. There's no, will is an all-encompassing deal. Your fingers want it, your toes want it, your whole body wants it. And it's the same with pleasure, which is even a deeper level within the person. The pleasure, if your finger wasn't feeling the pleasure, then you can't have pleasure anyway. If your little tooth was hurting, there is no pleasure. If a little piece of skin was irritating you, there's no pleasure. The pleasure has to be everywhere. Furthermore, if you had pleasure for too long, it wouldn't be pleasure anymore. It would be pleasurable. It would just become natural, become normal. So, when you have something good, you want it to, all good things must end. They must end, or else they won't be good anymore. They'll just be normal. So if I went to visit the beach, and then I bought a house and lived on the beach, I would hardly go to the beach. Because that's not pleasure, it's normal. Oh well, maybe, that's me. You say now, you go to the beach every day, you lie there for an hour in the sun, then you go swimming a little bit, you come back, and you'll read another book, and then you go back in. You get sick and tired of that as well. It's like eating steak of it. Well, I eat steak of it. No.
Never get tired of eating steak. I'm a butcher's kid, what can I tell you?
No, but as it says in several places in Hasidic philosophy, that ta'anug k'midi eino ta'anug. Constant pleasure is not considered pleasure. That would become normal, that would become natural. You'd have to go away for a vacation. If that people will come, they say, wow, you're living in a park. I say, yeah, I actually work in the park. If I want to go away, I got to go to somewhere else. That's how, because when you live there, you don't pay any attention. It doesn't hit your eyes anymore. Wow! There's no wow. Wow factor is gone. You just cannot do it all the time. to have the pleasure. So pleasure is very, very sensitive. Pleasure. It has to be everywhere, and it has to be only at certain times, and so on. We didn't think it would be another table, huh?
No, we didn't. I think we can fit one more in.
Yeah, plus usually Charlotte got that table, and we finish, we clean up on the table, we bring it here for Sunday, but we're here yesterday. So now, in addition to the 10 that we spoke about within the person, there are 2 more that are sort of not outside the person, but encompassing. They're all over the person, the will and the pleasure. So those are deeper elements within the person, and those are also deeper elements within the world. And the world has 10 structured levels, and each level does something else to the energy until it gets to the end. But dictating higher above the world is what is called in Kabbalah the crown level. A crown is not a head. It sits on top of the head. It encompasses the head. It's sort of above the brain. And there are 2 parts of the crown. There is the external part of the crown, that's will. Will is a very outside level. And then there's the internal part of the crown, that's pleasure. Pleasure is very, very singular. It's very personal. What gives someone pleasure may not give you. So you're saying you can't wait for steaks every single day because you're the butcher's daughter and that's how you grew up. And Sarah's saying, I can't even eat any steaks. I don't get any pleasure from that at all. So what gives her pleasure is different than what gives you pleasure. And what gives me pleasure is we're all different in that area. So it's very sensitive and very self. So that's the internal part of the crown, the deeper part of the crown, the deeper part of the person. And by example. So then when you see over here chambers, and then the 10 Sefirot in the bottom paragraph on page 30, the last 3 lines, chambers, 10 Sefirot, the chariot is the idea even higher than all of that. And time and space, which is not even part of the world, but it functions within, the world functions according to it. Just like over here, we function with time. Everything around us is time. When to get up, and when to go to sleep, and when to eat, and when to go to work, and when to pick up the phone, and when everything is time. And Judaism is very, very time focused. Putting on tefillin can only be at a certain time. Prayer is only at a certain time. And saying the Shema has a limited time. And then the Shabbos comes in at a certain time. It goes out at a certain time. And the Kabbalah, all of these things are time-based. They're all related to time. So in the other world, there is no time that really exists, but there is some form of space, and therefore if there's a space, there has to be time as well. Not in the way that, not the physical way, but there has to be, because there are different levels. You see, in a different world, there must be different elements of space. Not in a spatial where they're taking up physical space, but in some form there has to be a time. What's more is that in the other world, for example, the Talmud says that the fires of Gehenna, the fires of hell, there is no fire in hell, there is no fire burning in hell, but you use that metaphor. The fires of hell are extinguished on Friday afternoon at noon, Israel time, and they only stoked up late when Saturday night is over. That's late. So there is time.
So what does
Holiday.
that mean, the fires of hell?
Well, we've talked about hell before. Now we can get really we're really stuck in hell. I like but it means that the punishment it's not a punishment, it's a purgatory. Hell is looked at as the opportunity to grow, but a painful one. It's not a destruction. It's a cleansing. It's a way of the soul getting rid of the worldly stains that are stuck to the soul from all the things that it didn't accomplish in this world. But it's on its way up. It's not on its way down. hell is not, there is no space. And here's where we go with space. Heaven is not up there and hell isn't down there. We just use that metaphor because we don't have any other way to explain it. But there is no heaven and hell as an upstairs and downstairs. I take the elevator up and take the elevator down. And you're not visiting some angel that's standing there and saying, "Oh yes, and what's your name?" There is no reception desk there.
Get online to the buffet.
Right, we use these physical metaphors just to give us some kind of picture, but it's completely not physical. There's no physical to it whatsoever. It's just nothing like it. But we use these metaphors. The Torah uses metaphors. The hand of God. God got angry. God sat down. It's just to give us the capacity, visual imagination.
Yeah.
So the fires of hell means that the purgatory, the pain that the soul suffers through that cleansing process, and that is in Pirkei Avot, in the ethics section of the Talmud, it says that 1 moment, 1 hour of hell-like pain in the other world is worse than any pain that this world has. Just 1 moment is worse than anything you can possibly endure and imagine in this world. If a person lives a life of pain and suffering, some people are born just with it.
Right.
It's nothing compared to even 1 hour of that adventure, if you will, of the pain that the soul endures, because it's on a soul level, so it's a much deeper level. And again, it's not a punishment. One does not go there to be punished. The punishment doesn't exist. The punishment for a soul is to come back down to this world and not to experience it. It sees it and it can feel it, and then says, "But you're going back down because you didn't accomplish, you didn't finish, you didn't fulfill it, you did too much. You come in with too much baggage. You got to get rid of it now." And then that is the most painful thing, because first of all, the soul is in the spiritual world right now, and second of all, because there's no guarantee. Go through life again, and then after that, one will get rid of that baggage. So it's a problem. These are the non-fun sides of heaven. Anyway, so despite the fact that there's no physical space, the way we understand it here in this world, the way we function in this world, there is some form of time and space, because again, hell doesn't go on forever, it comes and goes. There are things that are based on times on this world. And imagine the biggest thing that the Jewish people could have is a temple, Beis Hamikdash, a holy temple in Jerusalem. And within that, the most important part of that presence is to offer animals to God.
Why is that?
That's a good question. Very good question. I'm telling you,
You're not going to do it today.
if you send me an email, I'll forward
Part
it.
of hell.
We could do that on the Tuesday night.
I will forward you.
Kabbalah hell talk.
I will forward you a Big Shabbos email that I wrote a few months ago. You probably did. The last week of the book of Leviticus. It started off by saying in the recently concluded festival of Passover, a person had read the prayer and said, when we get back to the temple, we'll offer this and we'll offer that. And this bull, 2 bulls and 3 sheep and this and that. What's going on? Is that what we're going back to the temple for? To eat meat? Is this a butcher? Is, all the blood that's being sprinkled on the corners of the altar? Paschal lamb? I mean, what is this? That's what the person, Mel, asked me that question. On the last day of Passover, he came over to me. He said, "Look, I've been reading this. We had to get services here because we had quite a few people here, so we were hoping to have services more often." He said, "I've been reading this every day, and I'm sitting on my head. How many sheep and what is this?"
That's the 5th boy.
The fifth son?
5th son.
Basically, the very basic one on one toe is that transformation of something physical to something spiritual is the whole goal of this world. That's why we're here. We're here to take a simple cup of hot water and some tea leaves and make a blessing on it. And when I did that, whatever's in here, whatever goes down, will now be on an elevated level. It now helped me study together with you. As a result, the energy of this tea and this water has now been elevated. I made a blessing on it, it's kosher, and I taught Torah through this.
And that's what happens when you do this.
Every single time. You can't see it.
The altar, the animal.
It's the highest level of that. God says this is where it's a pleasant aroma to God. Oh yeah? He likes burnt meat, burnt flesh. Is that what he enjoys? That blood that he's sprinkling, is that what he likes? Of course not. He says, take the fat that's over the liver and the fat that's in the top of the tail and the fat that's on top of the stomach, and that's for God. For God. Now that fat is for God. Oh, that fat of the animal is for God. As if we wanted to eat that fat. The whole thing doesn't make sense, except that the idea is that the transformation. I can't get into more than that. I'll forward you that email if you want.
That was it. No more.
It was from the month of early June, in early June. And that was just a small tidbit of that. There's a lot more to that as well. So every single thing we do in this world, when we put on tefillin, it is the skin, leather of an animal. The animal had no chance to become holy. The cow out there in the field is just mooing and eating grass. But when it's taken and elevated by putting on tefillin, by writing on its skin, that's Sefer Torah, or the mezuzahs on the door, and then the mezuzahs hanging here, that animal, a piece of that animal is hanging on my door. Think about it. And every time one passes it and puts that in, and reminds themselves of God, the energy of that animal would have had no chance to be elevated, is now receiving a very deep and high form of elevation. And so are we. By the mere fact that we remind ourselves, that we touch it. All of these actions create something. There's an energy there. No, what's the second law? Was it the second law of physics? Or what's his name?
Newton.
Is it Newton? That no energy goes to waste or something?
Energy cannot be created.
Yeah.
Destroyed?
Oh.
Very good.
We all learned it.
They may have learned it, but a lot of us forget it. Have no use for that
Try
kind
to
of stuff.
stop you.
As in everything else.
1 out of 100.
Nice.
You're on your way.
So that energy, if that's a law in physics, you can imagine it's the same law. Everything in the physical reflects the spiritual. It's all the same type. It's all a reflection of something else. So that law of physics is especially pertinent. Oh, but where is that energy? That energy is stored. It's waiting. And so when we do get up there to the reception, and they say, hey, wait a minute, you're full of stains here. Look at this. You didn't do this. You didn't do that. You did this. You shouldn't have done that. Blah, blah. Hey, we have some trouble here. You have a heavenly tribunal. And then a wagon load comes. I gave tzedakah on that day, and I came kosher on that day, and I came to the synagogue, and I studied Torah, and I had the mezuzahs, and I put on the tefillin, and I gave a smile to this person, and I did. Hey, that's all I have, stains. That's where the situation comes from. And there are stories abound of people who weren't very well behaved in their lives, but the one thing they did, which just tipped the scales, even though it was only one thing, but it was so significant. In this world, it was a very significant thing. I wrote about this 2 weeks ago, last week, about the guy who came to his friend on the deathbed. And he said, am I going to have a portion in the world to come? And this was one of the greatest Torah scholars. The question was, are you studying Torah because you enjoy studying? And because you have that nature to just sit down and study. So that's not really an accomplishment. But when he said that he found that purse, he had two purses, a purse that was designated for charity and a purse that was designated for his own Purim meal. And he took the Purim meal purse and he dispersed it to the poor, making a mistake, Then he got home, he says, oh, wait a minute, that person's for the poor. So, but instead of taking that purse for himself, he said, no, that was designated for the poor, I don't want to touch it. Ah, that's an action that shows that you weren't just doing things because you wanted to. Nobody wants to dismiss another purse of money and give it away. And you did it because to do something real, do an action. Now I know you're going to get your high portion of the world. It's not just a natural thing that you're doing. That was the idea of last week, before the wasps came into
Yeah, we're
his
ready.
bedroom. I say the bedroom so I don't have to show
You
you.
had to photograph the wasp.
I can do that. I'll take
He's gonna do a year's worth of video.
a video. Well, and they're up. I don't know what. I looked at them this morning. There's 3 there now. One of them must have hatched. I don't know. Anyway, there were a bunch of wasps over here. I think one of the kids threw out the nest. Yeah.
Well, lucky they didn't get stung.
It was done from they had some kind of a cover on the head. Anyway, but back to the work of it. So the worlds and the higher worlds do react to space and time and so on and so forth. And so that's the structure of each world. So each world has the same exact mirror image. They all have the 10 that we just spoke about, and the 2 higher ones, and then the idea above it, and then the time, and so they all have the same thing, except they function in different ways. They all are, in order to diffuse the godliness, the extreme godliness in the energy that's coming from God, so that once it gets down to the bottom, to the final destination, it shouldn't look like God, because then we wouldn't be able to function the way we do, but it should look like grass and trees and houses and nature. Look like that, like wasps and whatever. Okay. 32. The essential nature of Atzilut, which is revelation of the concealed. So, we mentioned before that the rest of the worlds are sort of created. They are part of the creation. And in fact, the second world is called the world of creation. The world 32. It says 32 on it. Yeah, it would say 32. So the worlds after Atzilut, which is the highest, most intense world, the worlds following that are sort of an entity. You don't see God as much. So that means that the world of Atzilut, which is a world of God, what is it called a world for? What would it be called a world? Because there God is sort of revealed. It's the revelation of the concealment. In other words, it's a lesser level. The highest levels would be where God is so intense that it's not possible to be revealed. So this is the end of that whole level where to whatever extent God is revealed there. Again, the essential nature of Atzilut, which is revelation of the concealed, like one who kindles one lamp from the flame of another, is not the same as that of Berea, which is a being from nothingness and an ethereal, intangible element. Look at footnote 34 on the bottom left. The nature of Atzilut is one of revelation of what is higher than Atzilut, as I just mentioned before. It is not the creation of something else. In other words, new levels. It is similar to a flame that was kindled from another flame. The first flame does not lose any light to kindle the new flame. It is written in the book of Numbers, the book of Bamidbar, he caused the spirit that had been imparted on Moses to emanate, and he bestowed it on the 70 elders. This was a story where the Jewish people complained about manna. You would think that of all things to complain about, when they kvetch about the food that, well, the Talmud discusses this at great length because it's really a disturbing problem. Why would you complain about food that's coming from heaven and that had every taste? Even if you don't like steak, then you don't have to eat. You can taste, if you like cucumber, you eat it all day. It had any taste you wanted. Whatever you thought of, that's the taste that it had. Why would you complain about that? And so the Talmud talks about they only got a certain measurement every day. The next day you don't know what you're going to have. You always think about what's in your store. There are other ideas there. But when Moses heard that complaint, Moses really got angry. And he lashed out to God. And he said, where am I? They're complaining for meat. Where am I going to get meat from? To feed all these people. And am I like a wet nurse that has to carry babies and like feed every single thing? And he gets really, he's like emotional. He's letting it out to God. This is in the third portion of the book of Numbers. God's response is amazing. In fact, it's quite shocking. God's response is, it doesn't even say, all right, hold on, calm down. It doesn't say, he says, and God said to Moses, gather to me 70 people, and they will be your helpers. You can't do it? No, but these are my children. The book of Isaiah is filled with amazing, there's just such beautiful expressions, emotions of how great things will be, comforting, and God is going to be, and the young and the old will dance in the streets, and how the vision for the Mashiach's coming. But he doesn't begin that way. Isaiah begins in very harsh terms. In fact, in the first chapter of Isaiah, he says, this is a nation that's heavy with sin. And then all of a sudden he changes his language from about chapter 9 or something. So the Talmud says, what happened here? And the Talmud says that he started off that way, and God called him out on it. God said, what are you talking about? A nation that's filled with sin, heavy with sin? What are you, this is my children. So he said, Isaiah said, can't you see what I'm seeing? Don't you see this? And God said, they're my children. This is my children. You need to change that language. You need to change that tone. When we have children, they may sin, but they're our children. And don't get little, don't miss. And that these remained, the words, the negative words remained in the text, just to give us a glimpse of the real love. This is like a father to a child, a parent to a child. Where even though despite the negatives and the problems and whatever, that's our child. How could you, what are you going to do to your child? So God takes it and he calls the 70 elders and he says, and on those people you will emanate. And that means you won't lose anything from yourself. They're like a flame. But what happens after that is that these two people, Eldad and Medad, have this prophecy, now that they've been bestowed this great spirit from Moses. And you know what their prophecy is? That Moses is going to die, and Joshua will take over. From that moment on, Moses loses his leadership capacity. And that's not a negative necessarily, because he said, I can't deal with the food. I have to feed them meat and God was saying, a leader takes care of everything. A leader is a leader, and if it's food, then it's food. And if it's Torah, it's Torah. That's what leadership is. Because immediately after that comes the story with Miriam and Aaron, and that they spoke about his wife. What were they saying? When his wife heard that Joshua was taking in the people, she said something to the effect of, "I pity Joshua's wife." And then they understood that Moses and his wife were living together, but they weren't, there's no relation, no physical relation between them, because Moses had to be on call all the time. And God takes opposition to that. And Miriam, he says that you shouldn't have spoken about it, it shouldn't mean anything bad. But the bottom line is that it all had to do with Moses dying. Then the spies come. He sends his spies, the next story. The spies go out, they come back, Moses falls on his face. They can't handle this. The next story after that is Korach, the rebellion, the mutiny. Moses falls on his face. And then the next story comes where they are demanding for water. And Moses falls on his face. In other words, he says, ah. And God tells him, go take the staff and speak to the rock. And he ends up hitting the rock. And then God says, okay, you're not going in. This is all as a result of what happened after that. That's why I say it's shocking. You follow the story here, you see. what's shocking is that it was a downhill from there. But what's not surprising is, again, as I said, not a negative. Moses didn't deal with petty stuff. He needed somebody who was more down to earth. It was because of his greatness, not because of his lowness. And he needed Joshua, who, as the Talmud describes him, as a face of the moon versus the sun. Moses being the sun and him being the moon, it's a reflection. So he didn't have that, so he could be more with the people, more focused on the people. Moses is the greatest and the best and all that. I'm not saying this as a negative, don't you? I'm just pointing out what happened as a result of this. But the bottom line is, though, that Moses emanated from himself to the other people, and yet he didn't lose any of his own greatness. In fact, it shows how greater he was. Let's see here. Now, after the parenthesis, Numbers 11:25, he caused the spirit that had been imparted on Moses to emanate, and he bestowed it on the 70 elders. That's that story. Their spirits did not become contracted. Rather, as it was on Moses, so it was on the elders. It didn't take anything away from them. Atzilut, that world of Atzilut, and that same word is used in this capacity. In the Torah, the word Atzilut, the Atzalti. Atzilut is as powerful as the level above it. It is merely a revelation of what is above it, which is concealed. Berea, the second world, Yetzirah, the third world, Asiya, the fourth world, however, are not like one who kindles one lamp from the flame of another, since they are creations of a new being, a new entity. So let's go back now to the second paragraph. Berea, in turn, is not the same as the essential nature of Yetzirah. See, Atzilut, the highest world, is the same as the previous world. It's just a revelation of something that was concealed. Berea is a new entity. And the next world under it, although they have the same capacity, is not a revelation of the previous world. That's what he says. Not the same as the essential nature of Yetzirah, where a finite form exists. Something finite is involved in that world. Nevertheless, in Yetzirah, form is more dominant than spiritual matter, and it is therefore not the same as the essential nature of Asiya, the next world under it, where matter dominates form. That's this world where everything is matter, everything is tangible, you can feel it. One who concentrates and exerts his mind to delve deeply into this matter will see that each world moves closer to spatial existence. That means our physical existence, tangible, which is characterized by 6 dimensions: up, down, and the 4 corners. The east, north, northwest, east, north, east, west, north, south, east. Gosh, easy for me to say, huh? And although even the world of Asiya, the action world, the lowest world, is absolutely spiritual before it reflects in this world, there is a spiritual side to the Asiya world, as will be explained. Please God, this does not mean that it is not in the realm of something of itself. So if you see 35, the meaning of this sentence is unclear. The Rebbe writes, the 7th Rebbe writes on this letter, which is written by his father-in-law predecessor, of this missing a few words here. So the letter sort of had some words blurred or whatever. But rather, it is within the realm of the lower world. So this world is not in the realm of the Atzilut, although it is sort of, successive. You start with Atzilut and you get down to this. It's not in the same group, although it's grouped in the same idea. They're all 4 worlds, except it's a whole different dimension, which is a being, a mitzvah in its own perception. So Atzilut is not really a being, it is percepting God, percepting the godliness of God, whereas the lower ones have a much deeper trouble perceiving God, and therefore they jump and they turn and they twist and they burn and they do all the different things that the prophet describes, because they are trying to get closer to God. And when they get this thing, they get all excited and energized, if you will, spiritually energized. So we've now described the 4 worlds in their basic form, and also what is in these 4 worlds and why they're necessary, because they're all eventual creations. They're all there to eventually create this world. and that this world should be a world of godliness, and yet you don't see any godliness out there at all in this physical, tangible world unless you really look for it. Because to the naked eye, all you're seeing is grass and wasps and birds and animals and whatever, doors and walls and stuff like that. Good. That will be enough for today.